Find out what you do best, step number 1. And step 2, do it.
Today, life is great.
Welcome to KnoxCast, Music on Music. I'm trumpeter, composer, vocalist Knox Summerhour, and this is where the world's top musicians, composers, producers, and industry professionals tell us how they've made their way in the world of music for TV, film, video games, stage, studio, and more. Carl Saunders is the best jazz trumpet player you've never heard, and if you have heard him, as I have, you might just stop at the best. John Williams, Stan Kenton, Benny Goodman, Frank Sinatra, Mel Torme, Tony Bennett, on and on. Carl has performed and or recorded with all of them. Now with 4 jaw-dropping solo albums of his own, all available on iTunes and elsewhere, he's also focused on recording most, if not all, of the songs he's composed over the years, which are available in his new book entitled New Jazz Standards, available on carlsaunders.com right now. He's become a friend and a musical mentor of mine, so without further ado. So the first question, since you just got back from Las Vegas, I thought it was very appropriate because you've always kind of been back and forth between Vegas and LA.
I was born in Indianapolis. We moved to New York when I was right after I was born because my mother was singing with her brother's band, my uncle Bobby Sherwood, who had some hit records and stuff in the big band era. And from 0 to 5, I was out on the road with the band, like traveling. And then when I was 5 years old, my mom got out of the music business to keep me out of it because my whole family was swept up in it. And we moved out to L.A. and moved in with my Aunt Caroline, who was married to the saxophone player that was with Bobby's band, Dave Pell. So Dave Pell became my uncle, too. So then we lived in L.A. from when I was 5 years old till I was 12. Then I moved to Vegas. But while I was in L.A., we were living partially with Dave Pell and my Aunt Caroline. And when he started the Dave Pell Octet, I used to listen to the record all the time, and that's when I heard Don Fagerquist, who was the trumpet player with Dave Pell Octet. And it inspired me to play Warm and Beautiful.
And I want to talk about Dave Pell a little later. Your mom was the first singer with the Stan Kenton Orchestra, is that right?
Yeah, she had a radio show in Hollywood.
And what's her name?
Well, her name was Gail Sherwood, but she had a radio show in Hollywood, and the 2 piano players that worked with her was Van Alexander and Stan Kenton.
Oh, wow.
So when Stan started his band down in Balboa, Stan asked my mom to sing with the band till they got somebody steady. So she went down and sang with the band. She was the first singer with Stan when he started the band down in Balboa.
Now at Olive Garden, when we one of the first times I met you, you and I went to Olive Garden. You probably don't remember this, and you told me the story about when you were you were on the road with your mom when you were really young, and Stan Kenton's band, and
no, not Stan, with my
Bobby Sherwood.
Band.
Okay, tell us that. I thought that was really funny.
Oh, do you mean? Yeah. Well, I remember being held, as a baby, and I looked up at the band, and I liked the trumpets because the lights were glistening off of the brass, the lacquer and stuff, and I just noticed it because of that, like the flashing of the light.
And you were being rocked in the wings. You remember being rocked in the wings by your mom. Mm-hmm. And how old were you at this point?
Who knows? 2.
Nobody remembers anything
I'm
before
being held. I mean, if evidently I couldn't walk yet.
I did want to talk about Dave Pell. Fred Mills introduced me to Dave Pell long before I met you, which was like 10 years before I moved to Los Angeles, and I immediately fell in love with them, and of course Don Fagerquist solo. I'd never heard quite a crafty solo in that way, before hearing him. I wanted to bring this up because I've talked about it with a few people through the years. Some people challenge the notion that there's a difference between West and East Coast jazz and the New York style of, what tends to be more edgy, I guess, and the West Coast sound. And to me, that group epitomizes the West Coast sound. I don't know if they defined it, but talk a little bit about that, and if you think there's a difference.
It's a justifiable observation. The West Coast jazz is more, you could say, polite and clean, which I don't mind, but I like hard burning rhythm, the hard burning rhythm. I don't like the polite rhythm, like a polite drummer and a polite bass player. But I mean, Fagerquist was so clean, like Carl Fontana. He was so clean and perfect,
So what is your opinion about what role that group played in defining the sound of West Coast jazz?
Well, it was just part of the West Coast jazz. There was a lot of groups like that. Marty Page, did a lot of.
Who arranged for them too? I think
He arranged a lot of charts for the octet, and so did Shorty, and
even Johnny Williams
and John Williams, yeah, and Bill Holman, and all of those guys have their own bands and wrote for their own bands. So they kind of they were writing for a lot of people. Just the way they wrote kind of. Defined the West Coast way of approaching jazz.
This is Carl's version of Chopin's Minute Waltz.
Back in the day when Vegas was popping with a lot of work and the shows, and they had the best trombone players in the world in that town. I'm talking about jazz trombone players, not just section guys. They had Carl Fontana, and they had Jimmy Gwen, who was with the Al Boletto Sextet, and Jimmy Gwen was a fabulous jazz player. Nowadays, for my money, Scott Whitfield is the greatest jazz trombone player of all time. He blows them all away of all time.
All time.
Fontana, Rosalino, give anybody. He'd blow them all away. That's my opinion. And my opinion is pretty good.
I know. And I just saw him the other day at a rehearsal, or played with him at a rehearsal. I get lucky to sit behind him and hear him just do what he does and plays trombone like it's soprano trombone.
Right, yeah, he's got high chops, he's got bebop, he's very knowledgeable with the chord changes, he writes, he's one of the top musicians we have on the planet. plus the greatest jazz trombone player of all time. I keep saying that.
Plus that,
Because I spent 30 years with Carl Fontana, and so I don't say that lightly.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll show Scott the tape, and he'll be very happy you said that. Although I'm sure you've told him to his face.
He knows.
Yeah. When you moved to Las Vegas, you were in high school. You started playing with the Stan Kenton band. Is that right?
When I got out of high school, Stan came to Las Vegas, and we were all Stan Kenton freaks, in high school. We were listening to Stan Kenton. I used to listen to Stan Kenton, Billy Mays band, the Hi-Lo's, Four Freshmen, and the Terry Gibbs band was just starting up, that Dream Band with Al Porcino playing. And so we were listening to that type of stuff, and then all of a sudden, Stan Kenton comes to Las Vegas in the lounge at the Riviera, and so me and my friend, trumpet player in high school, we were out of high school, but we went down about every night and stand outside the lounge and listen to Stan's band play, and we'd puff on cigarettes, to make the security guards think we're older, but I think they were hip to us. And then my mom knew Stan from the old days, when Stan worked for her, and she went down and sang with the band. So we went, and this is 20 years later or whatever, from that, she went down and talked to Stan and said, the kid's got a good ear and he'll be a good player someday. Why don't you give him a shot? So Stan gave me an audition, and I went down and got up on the bandstand, and I never had a jazz. There was no jazz program in my high school. In other words, it was just marching band, concert band, and pep band. The closest thing to a jazz band was the pep band for the basketball games.
Yeah.
And so when I got up on the stand with Stan Kenton's band, I was green. I was a green recruit, And I was sitting on the edge of the section and playing and just hanging in there best I can. And then Stan motioned something to Dalton Smith, who was the lead trumpet player, and he passed a lead part down to me. And I started gagging immediately. And it was on Walking Shoes, the Jerry Mulligan tune chart. And so we played it, and I got through it fairly well because I knew it from the record. So Stan thought I could read,
Oh, right. So you're just reciting it.
So after the audition, Stan said, you can have the first opening in the trumpet section, or you can leave next week with the band playing Mellophonium, which that was the Mellophonium band at the time. So what's a kid to do? I said, yeah, I'd leave, go out playing Mellophonium. And there you go. And I went out and played about a year and a half playing Mellophonium with Stan's band. It was kind of a college in a way,
Growing up today and you wanted to play jazz, if you were 17 or 18 years old, what would you be doing, you think, with your talent set?
Well, I don't know what I'd be doing, but I can suggest anyone that was interested. I mean, someone's got to be interested in it and have a passion for it and willing to pay some dues and dedicate themselves to it, which is, I guess you do that in any genre. I mean, any type of work or whatever. But to listen to the right people, like if you're, I'm a trumpet player, so I would say listen to, Dizzy Gillespie back in the late 40s before his cheeks started puffing, because that's when he was playing his best, and I don't think anybody's ever played any better than that. You listen to him play that stuff that he was playing back in the late 40s with Bird and stuff, like It's phenomenal. He was, I don't think anybody's touched him since, I mean, he never could follow himself after his cheeks started puffing, because his cheeks would have to fill up before the air hit the mouthpiece, and, it was like a delayed reaction thing. And, he wasn't, I mean, he played good in the 50s and the 60s, but, when his cheeks started puffing, it kind of hampered him, his total thing that he had going. But Freddie Hubbard was the heavyweight champion of jazz trumpet. You listen to him play his early Freddie. Sort of late Freddie, he started trying to play high notes and squealing around, and I don't know what happened to him, and then he started playing kind of commercial records to try to make money, like Herbie Hancock did. He started playing little kind of semi-fusion-y type beats like the Watermelon Man and all that stuff, and Herbie wanted to make some money instead of just being a starving artist, jazz artist, and being a purist. But I don't want to do that. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I'd rather just be a purist and not be rich.
Whenever Christmas comes around, I'm always reminded that everybody loves jazz. I mean, maybe not hardcore jazz, but all the Christmas songs are very harmonically complex compared to anything that's going on in pop music today. And they're, even though it's not.
Do you mean Santa Claus is coming to town and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
I mean, some of those Andy Williams songs and Johnny Mathis. You look at Nat King Cole recorded a lot of Christmas songs, and they're pretty harmonically complex. And I just wonder how do we get the rest of the world?
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire?
Yeah, compared to what would be written today, it's more harmonically hip.
It's like closer to the American Songbook, except you only listen to them 2 weeks a year.
Right, so how do we get the general public to pay attention to even that level of jazz the rest of the year?
Well, I think it's the responsibility of the disc jockeys and the record the radio stations, because they take the theory that, like the newspapers, give the public what they want. The public doesn't know what they want. The public, if you play stuff over and over and over and over, the public will like it eventually. So my theory is, get the disc jockeys, the radio stations, to get off their butts and start playing good, more progressive music, swinging stuff, good jazz, and good pop stuff, Tony Bennett, Peggy Lee, Frank Sinatra, Joe Beam, musical things, and jazz, and start playing it over and over, and people will pretty soon they'll start tapping their foot, and pretty soon they'll start liking it. And I also think that the reason that jazz is a minority market is because no one's swinging and put in that pocket. That rock and roll's got a pocket. Boom, boom, ping, boom, ping, boom, boom, ping. You can feel it, I mean, I don't necessarily like it, but I can feel the beat. Where with jazz, you've got to feel the beat. Duke Ellington said, "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing," and he was right. And I think the reason people don't like jazz is because it's not swinging, and they're not playing together, and they're not grooving, and they're not putting a pocket on that beat, that jazz beat.
This is Carl playing his tune, Nigeria. When you compose a tune, which comes to you first? The melody, harmony? Is it a groove? Or do you have like, this is a separate question, but related, do you have an external source of inspiration like nature or painting or something like that?
Very rarely do I have an external source. I write music for the sake of music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't write for the tree out front or I've written some tunes for lost relationships with chicks or something. I've named some tunes after some chicks, and then I've named some tunes after people, like kind of a tribute to them. But
is that after the tune is already written, or before?
Sometimes I'll write it for the sake, it's sometimes. But as far as where the comes first, the changes, the chords, both. Sometimes a lot when I first started writing, I'd just like get a set of chord changes and play them because I play bass lines and get a comping feel of the changes and kind of get a little set of changes, and then I'll write the changes out and then I'll put a melody to them. Or sometimes if I hear a melody, while I'm hearing the melody, I also hear the changes. So there's no writing the changes that much unless you run into some weird turnaround or something. You want to find some sort of an artistic way of worming your way through the progressions. But both. Sometimes I'll just hear changes and write the changes out and then write a melody, or sometimes I'll hear a melody and I'll write the melody down and then put changes to it. But usually the melody suggests the changes, unless you're going to like go real weird or far out.
What is your theory about practicing jazz and how a student should go about it?
Well, I've always thought that practicing jazz was like a oxymoron, meaning you can't practice jazz. You practice your horn, you practice your scales, you practice the fundamentals of your instrument, and then if you have jazz in you, then go out and play it. Practicing jazz, I always thought was I didn't like that. It just didn't sit well with me. But now I'm starting to change my mind a little bit. I don't like. I never liked the concept of copying solos out and writing them out. You're like delving into someone's mind, someone's sacred scrolls. It's kind of a invasion of privacy in a way. And that's how I always thought it. But now I'm starting to change my mind a little bit on that too. I've written this thing called a jazzercise, which is instead of practicing in a book and you're looking at the notes and you're going da 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 da, and then you come back the next day and those notes are still there. So you go da 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 da, unless you turn the page, and then those notes are always been there. So those notes are always there. With my jazzercise, it's just a set of chord changes. So every time you play it, it's different because you're playing jazz. So the jazzercise is the first jazzercise 1, is a set of chord changes, the minor chord resolving to up a fourth to the 7 chord, to a 7 chord, right? And it starts on a bar of C minor 7, and then resolves the next bar to F7. Then the next bar, you take that F7 and minor that, and make it F minor 7 to B flat 7.
That's How High the Moon.
And then you take the next bar and you take that B flat 7, you minor that, and then you go B flat minor 7 to E flat, and then E flat minor to A flat, and then A flat minor, and you just go through that cycle of minor 7s to 7s, which is what's the basis of jazz. If you look at if someone passes you a part that's got hieroglyphics on it, meaning chord changes, you're going to see B flat minor 7 to E flat 7 to, you're going to see those resolutions all the time. So this is the basis of jazz. So the jazzercise, and it's a tune. It's like it turns around like it's like a tune without end. If you blow C minor 7 to F7, then F minor 7 to B flat minor 7 to E flat, and you just go around the horn playing all the minor 7s to 7s in all the keys, and then you'll do it again, and you'll do it different. But you're just getting acquainted with getting your fingers and your eyes on the minor 7s to 7s, and then jazzercise 2 is C minor 7 for a bar to F7 for a bar to B flat major 7. So it resolves to a major 7, which the first jazzercise didn't.
You get the 1.
And then you take that B flat major 7 and you minor that. And if you go through all the way around to the end, it'll only do 6 chords. So then you got to go to jazzercise 2B, which is up a half a step, and you just go to B minor, or down a half a step or whatever, and B minor to E, and that gets the rest of the keys, but you're going to a major 7. So it's resolving C minor 7 to F7 to a major 7, which you see in jazz chord changes all the time. In tunes, you see that all the time. They're just basic progressions. And that's the basis of jazz. And if you practice those, you're not playing the same notes all the time. You're playing different. Every time you play through it, it's different because you can't remember what you played. And we have all our licks, and you'll repeat your licks, but you'll repeat them in different places and at different times and different speeds and different rhythms.
Your latest 2 projects have been recording your own tunes with Scott Whitfield, who we talked about, and Sam Most.
Sam, I was been recording Sam, at my house in Vegas. I've got like a box of reel-to-reels of Sam playing in Vegas in my front room back in the 70s and great stuff. But, finally, and then I made some CDs, homemade CDs through the 90s with Sam, with good rhythm sections. I mean, I was playing drums, and Christian Jacobs playing piano, and Kevin Axton, Dave Stone, and different bass players, and recorded about 6-7 CDs, full CDs of all my tunes, of Sam playing them on baritone, clarinet, alto flute, and flute. And he brings the tunes to life. He was so knowledgeable of the chord changes, and he could go through hard chord changes and just make it sound so simple. And so I decided he was 82, and I decided to take him in the studio and do a record for real. And we did 12 of my tunes that he picked. And then we did the overdubs over at my house, Sam's solos and heads and stuff. And we finished recording 2 weeks before he died, so it was like a premonition to get the record done. And they were all my tunes, and I got a book out called New Jazz Standards, so I called the album Sam Most New Jazz Standards, and it's on Summit Records. And then I recorded Scott Whitfield, and it's called Scott Whitfield New Jazz Standards Volume 2.
Right.
And right now,
Are they available online or just on your website?
Summit Records. And in March, I'm releasing Volume 3, which is all done and ready to go, and it's going to be Roger Kellaway Trio, and he picked 12 tunes, and it's going to be New Jazz, Roger Kellaway New Jazz Standards Volume 3. And I have already recorded Larry Kuntz, the great guitar player, with Josh Nelson, Joe LaBarbera, and Tom Warrington. And that's going to be Larry Kuntz, New Jazz Standards Volume 4. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and then that's all from the book, New Jazz Standards, which is a book that I
wanted to
published.
mention you can get that on your website, right?
Yeah.
The New Jazz Standards.
And it's printed in concert, B-flat, E-flat, and bass clef.
And you got, tell me, on the very front cover, the John Williams wrote you a nice blurb,
right?
Nice promotional testimonial.
Right.
So tell me how that came about.
Well, I went back to Tanglewood, I'm thinking in 2004, and we played the John Williams Shelley Mann My Fair Lady album.
Oh, wow.
And, it's like a big band and then a small group, so I was in the small group. John's brother, Don, has been a close friend of mine for quite a few years, and he lived around the corner from me in Vegas, and now he lives around the corner from me here.
Don Williams is a percussionist. For those that didn't know, I didn't know before you told me about him that he's a percussionist, studio percussionist here.
Okay, so I knew Don's mother, who was also John's mother, because I'd go over and hang out with Don. And so Don's and John's mother died. So John's mother's favorite tune is Can't Get Started. So John asked me to come play Can't Get Started at the funeral.
Wow. Was that after you had recorded it on your album or before?
Oh, way before.
Way before.
And so I went over there with Tom Garvin, piano player, and I played it for live at the church, So, that's why I knew John, like from those things. And so when I put the book out, I asked John I gave him a book and asked him to give me a blurb, and he did. And I got a blurb from Bill Holman and then Johnny Mandel.
I saw that, yeah.
So I was either going to try for the Pope next, but...
Well, you got the Pope of film music.
That's true, yeah.
Tell me how important writing is to you.
When you say write, I never studied music, really. I just was natural at it. And like I said, I was a bad student, so I never wanted to learn anything. I always thought I knew it all already.
You might have.
So I had a concept in my head, like... about music, and I could make music. When I was in high school, I was out playing basketball, and everybody else was practicing. The trumpet players in band, they were practicing, taking lessons, and playing the Carnival of Venice and all those things. I never could do that, but because I never practiced or took lessons. But when I got back into band, I was still better than them in the way that I had the concept of the music, and I could make music. And that's what I say when I do clinics now. I'll tell the kids, I'm going to talk to you today about what we do after we learn our instruments. I'm not going to talk about the mechanics or the fundamentals of playing the instrument. I'm talking to you about after we learn how to play our instrument, now what? And what that is making music. So it's like a natural thing. So what was your question again?
This is Carl playing Larry Dominello's composition, First Gift. folks would, I think, really be excited to know that you are in the Family Guy orchestra with Seth MacFarlane's show Family Guy and the other show American Dad. Talk a little bit about how fun that is.
Well, I mean, it's they just do these little cues,
Right.
a whole bunch of little do-do-ba-dee-ba-doo-ba-doo, ba-dum.
A lot of flugelhorn.
And then da-ba-ba-doo-ba-doo-boo-dee, little things like that, Occasionally there's some difficult stuff to play, but mainly it's kind of easy. We do flugelhorn and trumpet. And
Is that usually at Fox or?
at Fox all the time, and usually it's Larry Hall and Wayne Bergeron and I. And they make it, there's only 3 trumpets, 4 trombones, and about 35 strings over there, and full 4 French horns, and it's like a big studio, big orchestra.
And they do it all at the same time, simultaneous.
Oh yeah.
Session. Yeah, they don't break them up.
Yeah, Walter Murphy does all the composing and arranging.
The final question I had for you, unless you have anything else that's burning a hole in the microphone.
In my mind.
What's one piece of advice you wish you'd been given when you were young about a career in music as a freelance musician? One piece of advice you wish you'd gotten.
I used to tell people years ago, kind of this philosophy bag, I used to say there's 2 steps to success. Step number 1, find out what you do best. Now, finding out what you do best is kind of weird, because people, you look around, people aren't doing what they do best. They're doing what their family did, or what they got into by accident, or, they're not really doing what they do best, but they're doing it for a living now, and that's what they do. What they're doing is what they don't do best. Mm-hmm. So my advice was find out what you do best, step number 1, and step 2, do it.
Well, thank you for letting me do this.
Well, thank you for coming all the way from Culver City from your new house.
KnoxCast is brought to you by yours truly. I got more great interviews lined up with some really prolific and fantastic friends, so please subscribe to KnoxCast on iTunes, Stitcher, and follow me on Twitter at TrumpetKnox for podcast updates.
You are by my side with me.
Stay tuned and stay musical.
Today